Hello and welcome to session 10 of the MMO development class. I'm here and my name is Nelson. So last week we left off with pretty much an entirely functional game board. I'm going to go ahead and jump into the code real fast and alter some of those parameters so we can get a better idea of what we put together last week and where we're going with the code this week. So let's give the board width of like 4 and a board height of 20. So that's 80 runes. And so we saw that we can scroll the board vertically and horizontally if there was an overflow horizontally. This seems to work just fine. We can scroll the gutters as well, up and down. We can pick up a rune and place it, and if it fails placement, then it jumps back into the gutter. But if it succeeds, it gets placed onto the board. And then the space in the gutter kind of just disappears. Pretty much this is what I wanted to do with the game. As far as what the game actually is. It's very simple, very straightforward, and we spent about 3 weeks putting together the logic for the actual Unity game. So that's not a whole lot of time, but it was a nice little refresher into actually building things with Unity, which is pretty much the goal of this project, I guess you could say. So at this point, what we need to start looking at is, well, actually connecting to the server and having 2 players being able to place runes and having each other's views update depending on what's going on. So this will start to get into some actually interesting server-side logic and stuff. So yeah, unless there's anything that people want me to go over specifically, because this is, week 10, then I guess, I don't know, my OCD is flipping out right now and I just want to complete this board. Or at least this gutter. Oh, I'm almost done. And then as you see, as the gutter becomes so small that as to not be able to scroll, it starts centering itself and becomes unscrollable. So far, that's pretty much it for the game. This is the game we're building. It's just we now need to have 2 players be able to play each other. What about design? No, I'm not worried about the design. This design will be fine for what our purposes are. So if we remember where we left off, if I jump into the other scene, scene 1, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control B to bring up a dedicated window that I can play with. Blah, blah, blah. Then log in with AA. Log in, and it says sending, and now I'm in the awesome lobby. And then I can go BB, I can log in. Now I can challenge each other, waiting for a response from B. You have been challenged by A, I can reject, or I can accept, and if I accept, it says I'm in the game, which is pretty cool. But now what we need to be able to do is basically take all that logic that we created in the game test manager, where we instantiate a rune game object, initialize it with our board width, board height, and our sessions, and then add all the slots and runes to it. So the server needs to be able to send these parameters back to the client saying, okay, what's the board width, what's the board height, and then it's going to have to say what are the slots and what are the runes that we're wanting to add to the board. So let's go ahead and jump into my game object. I believe I have one, yes. So this is the game object that's responsible for the game. And if I go into I believe it's either the lobby. Yes, it is the lobby. Because if I go down here to session join game event, that's when sessions in game. Oh, wrong one. I want the game manager. Because the game manager is kind of responsible for determining what current view we're kind of looking at. I'm sort of making these game objects, I have view game objects and controller game objects. And I would say something like a game object is more of a controller that's going to control our view game object, which is our Rune game object, which, yeah, the names could have been better. So, yeah, at this point, when we have our game manager, we tell the lobby to be inactive, we fire up the game, and we add the component. But now we also have to tell the game about the sessions that are in the current game, because you'll remember this event that determines if sessions joined a game. What it does is just fires off IDs of users who are joining a game. So if we receive a message, sessions joined game event, and we have our user in that event, we need to create a game object, but then we need to tell that game object what sessions are going to be used. So we need a way to access the sessions out of the lobby in order to pass them into the game object. So I'm just going to say, the way I want this code to look is basically going to be game object dot, we can say initialize, and then I can go and jump into Chrome and Google it and spell it right. Initialize sessions, and then what I want to do is I want to pass in the session objects that are responsible for, or that are related to the user IDs that were passed in by this event, which currently the lobby is what's responsible for keeping that information. So I want to say lobby.get sessions for users, passing in event.user_IDs. So let's write that method first. I'm just going to select it, hit Control Enter to have ReSharper generate the method stub for me. And it's going to return an IEnumerable of something. I believe. Is it lobby session? Yeah, lobby sessions is what I want. Because I'm going to move this method up because it's public. Public method should be near the top. I'm going to move it up above all the handles because yeah, there we go. So now we can take a look at this add session method. And what I can go ahead and do is I can just say return sessions where user IDs contains t.value.id. And then let's go ahead and flatten that out and figure out why derp sessions.values. And then take off the value. Okay. So there we go. We get a list of lobby sessions based off user IDs. So that's pretty straightforward. Then what we want to do is now we have to go ahead and implement our initialize sessions in this, which will keep track of all of the game sessions that are part of this game. Now, what we have right now are lobby sessions. We don't have game sessions, which are slightly different. I consider a game session to be a wrapper over a session in the context of a game, whereas a lobby session is a wrapper over a session in the context of a lobby. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a private dictionary uint of game sessions that will be instantiated on awake. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for each var lobby session, or I can just say, nah, I won't bother with that. For each lobby session in lobby session game sessions.add session.id new game session passing in session.username session.id. Now currently lobby sessions and game sessions are pretty much the exact same thing, but actually, you know what I want to do? Hold on. This is going to accept an IEnumerable of game sessions. Then I'm going to do the transformation between lobby sessions and game sessions above where this abstraction is. So session user ID, of course, what am I doing there? I just wanted to say session. There we go. And then on my game manager, I'll do that conversion between those two types. So I'll select t new username ID. So that makes it a little bit less So now the game manager is kind of aware of the two types of a game session and a lobby session, but the actual game object is only aware of game sessions, and the lobby object is only responsible for lobby sessions. So that makes more sense to me. However, at this point, we now need to figure out how we want to send the game parameters into the game object. Now we know the game sessions, so we already know who's in the game, so we can present to the user in the game who your opponent is. But what we don't know is we don't know the game board width, the game board height, and what slots and what runes are in the game board. So we need to figure out okay, apparently people are having problems with my frame rate. Okay, I'll just keep an eye on this. If it spikes again, I'll figure something out. So what we need to do is figure out how do we want our... And again, in the spirit of this, I haven't really thought about the way I want to do this, so we're kind of going on an adventure together. If we respond to challenge and we end up creating a game, we say challenge.respond. That goes into here, which results in a lobby.accept challenge, which results in the game being created. Did I really write that? Okay, does anybody remember who made me write this? Because that looks like something I would do if somebody complained about my variable names. I don't even know what that variable means anymore. Hold on, let me rename this. What is this going to be? These are the sessions in game. Or how about sessions in new game? There we go. That looks better. Okay, so this is where the game actually gets instantiated. Well, no, now I know what it means because it has a name that I can actually read. Before, it was such a long name that I sat there and spent more time reading the name than I should have. So anyway, so we instantiate a new rune game, which is going to be kind of our object responsible for, well, handling the game. And so games.add game, challenge.destroy. Okay, so that's all good. But what we need to do is we need to figure out how we're going to pass the parameters of the game into the game and make all the clients aware of that. Now, we might run into an interesting situation. Photon does handle ordering, but we still might run into a race condition if we want to handle the events of the rune game inside of the game object. Because what happens is when this gets published, that's where the Unity client decides to go ahead and create the game object. And then that's when the game object then starts subscribing for events. So actually, no, the way that I did this before is, or the way I did this now is everything's being handled synchronously from the client. So actually it doesn't matter. I can send events after the session joined event to the game client, and it will be able to handle those through the game object. I love thinking about concurrency. It's the most fun thing ever. Okay, so at this point, after we do this stuff, what I can do is I can just have my game. I can actually go ahead and instantiate my game after I tell all the sessions they're part of the game. So now they will be properly subscribed with the right game object. So what I can do is, in the constructor of the rune game, I can initialize it with some parameters, such as board width, board height, and what runes I want to be in the game. So there's a bunch of different ways I can do this. I'm just going to go with something simple for now. Rune game is just going to have some constants that determine, or that initialize itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Google initialize again. So I'm going to say just initialize, and then I'm also going to write another helper method, private void publish to all I event event for each var session in session publish event. Now what I can do is something like publish to all new rune parameters. Hold on. Sorry about that. Rune or game parameters established event, which will be the parameters of the game, the width and the height and all that fun stuff. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to tell each one of the runes about, or each one of the clients about the different runes that are on the board. I suppose the easiest way to do that is to first move my guarantees order, so if the big message are still unless you get it on a different channel. No, I haven't been worrying about channels at the moment. Once things become more complicated and I have more events that require different channels, then that would be something I would take a look at. For chat messages, that's the only thing that I don't want to be handled synchronously. Everything else I do want it to be handled synchronously, so I'm not going to worry about that. But the first thing I need to do is I need to send my value objects, my rune and my rune slot, and my rune type. Where's my rune type? It's down here. I need to move these classes up into my server so that I can send this information from my server to the client. So to do that, I mean, the easiest way is just to right-click, open in File Explorer, pop down this, open up value objects, drag rune and rune slot into value objects, and then jump down here and drag rune type into value objects, jump back into Unity, go into code. Now I'm deleting these through, actually, there we go. I'm deleting these through Unity, so it deletes the appropriate meta files as well. So there, I've moved my value objects up into my server, so now my server can send those object types to my clients, which sounds like something that needs to happen. Okay, so now I have my rune slot, my rune type. Notice that the namespaces are now wrong. So to fix the namespaces, I'm just going to click on the project, Control-Shift-R, adjust namespaces, next. And there, my namespaces are now fixed. So now what I can do is on my game object, I can go ahead and send, I want to create an event that contains all of the slots and all of the runes for a particular game to the clients. So to do that, I can just say, well, the first thing I need to do is create an internal representation on the rune game itself of all the slots and all of the runes themselves. So I can just say private, let's start off with a list, or no, let's start off with a dictionary because they have unique IDs of rune, call this runes, this should be read-only. Dictionary and slot of rune slots, and then I can go ahead and instantiate these two in the constructor. Oh, come on, there you go. And now I've instantiated both of those. So then what I want to do is I want to figure out what this game needs as far as runes and rune slots. Fortunately, what I can do, but I also, actually no, I don't need to necessarily know their location because I can assume their location kind of implicitly based off what order they appear in the collection. Solution, was that a what to me or a what to someone? But anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, okay, I'm basically going to take the logic I already wrote in my game test manager and grab this and I'm going to just grab all of this stuff and paste it down here. and board width, board height, total size, that's fine. I don't need this code. And then what I can do is I can say, instead of game.add slot, I can say runeslots.add. The ID is going to be slot, or the ID is going to be slot type index. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Slot type index with the new rune slot, passing in slot type index. We're only doing numeric runes at this point. We'll do the symbolic ones later. And then we want rune index. And then the runes themselves are going to be the exact same. So this is going to be, the ID is going to be slot type index, and the type is going to be numeric, and the type index is going to be rune index. So there, I have all of my runes and rune slots created for this game. Now obviously in the future we would want this to be randomized or some other thing that we could do, but hold on, isn't location based off the go-to meeting seems to be working for everybody. As far as isn't it bad practice to assume location, well, I mean, I could go ahead and write that explicitly in if I wanted to, but the problem is that the server doesn't really care about location, and I was actually thinking about having location randomized on the client anyway. The server just uniquely identifies runes by IDs. So that's why I wasn't really worried about it too much. Typically I would be, but the position of things doesn't really matter in this game very much. So now what I can do is I can say publish to all, or game parameters established event. The game parameters I consider to be board width and board height, because that is something that will impact the difficulty of the game. Then I'm going to say publish to all new game rune slots established event, passing in my rune slots, and then publish to all new game runes established event, passing in my runes. Yeah, basically, yeah. I'm just kind of lazy right now, but I don't, just because it doesn't really matter in this case, I'm not worrying about it. It's just kind of a shortcut. Because, I mean, I want to get onto the MMO where position does matter quite a bit, actually. Publish is where we take an event and we send it off to the client. All the publish does is it invokes the Photon send event method, which then it just serializes all my event bytes and shoots it off. No, we're not constructing a new dictionary for every peer. We're just constructing one and then sending them off in events. Anyway, so now I have my events that I want to write. Game parameters established, game rune slots established, and game runes established. And that should pretty much make an entire game. So at that point, I can say new game started event. And once the game started event happens, that means the clients can now send in things. So let's go ahead and create these events. Oh, hold on. I need to move my my rune and my rune slots out of the server and into the base. I can't believe nobody noticed that. Because I need these to be referenced by the server and the client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all three of these, hit Control-Shift-R, say move to folder, and then I'm going to say RuneSlinger.base/value objects, and then hit next. And that's just resharper failing, actually. So there we go. Now the rune slot, and rune type are now in my base project, which means that they can be referenced by the client now. So anyway, now that I've done that, I can write my events. So what events do I need? If I jump back into my rune game class, which is right here, I need game parameters established, game rune slots established, game runes established, and game started. So game parameters established event. That is just going to implement iEvent, and it's going to have a uint board width and a uint board height. And now I need my game rune slots established event. Actually, that's going to be runeslots.values, and that's going to be runes.values because I want an IEnumerable of these, not an iDictionary. So create you're an iEvent, and you take in an IEnumerable of rune slots. Then for you are an iEvent, and you take an IEnumerable of runes. And then you are just an event that pretty much doesn't take in anything. Okay, so now we have these three events that we can now handle in our client to set up our game board. So I'm going to move this code over here so I can reference it. I'm going to hit Control F6, jump into Unity to make sure it picked up my new assemblies that I just compiled, and Unity's not coming up, because if we didn't run into a problem today, then hello? Okay, Unity is no longer coming up. I'm closing it. Come on. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go ahead and nuke it completely. Unity editor, die. And I'll fire it back up again. Okay, so now I'm back in here, and I can reload my project, and now it should compile, except for it won't, because I now need to add the appropriate because I changed the namespace of something that wasn't in the same project. I now have to basically go through all of my errors that I've just created and tell ReSharper to fix my imports. There we go. Okay, I fixed all my imports, now compiles. So now if I jump into my game object, the events we need to handle are going to be game parameters established, event, oops, I'm not inheriting from that, I'm inheriting an iEvent handler of that. Okay, so game parameters established. If you guys recall, I have this Rune game object. So what I'm going to do is on awake, I'm going to instantiate one. So I'm going to say underscore game view equals new Rune game object. Or sorry, game object factory.create Rune game object. And then I'll call this game view. And I'll create a field. And then, when we initialize it, we need to pass in game sessions, R session, game commands, board width, board height, and screen width. So, on initialized sessions, we're already handling that. So, when game parameters are established, I'm going to initialize it with my game sessions .values. R session, which I don't know yet. I completely forgot about that. This for the game commands for now. A board width of an event board width, and a board height of event board height, and a screen width of 10. We'll just make that constant. Then what I need to do is also have my game object implement iGame commands, And what that'll do is now what I'm basically doing at this point is the iGame commands interface is how the game object communicates back into my game object, if that makes sense. So now at that point, all I need to do is have the place rune method implemented, which I'm going to go ahead and give it the same implementation as my dummy one. There we go. However, in the future, these will be handled with events. So now the last parameter I need to initialize my game view is it needs to know which one of the game sessions is our session. So on my initialized sessions, I'm going to have a game session R session. And then I'm going to set R session to R session, create a field for it, and that's going to break, hold on, let me just pass in this parameter first. R session, however, this will break some code because I now need to, from the game manager, I need to tell it about this stuff. So our session is going to be go ahead and do that. I can make that a little bit nicer. And then our sessions is going to be game sessions dot single SS goes into user ID equals user ID. There we go. And let's do .toList on this, which will make sure I don't get different instantiations for my session and my session that's passed into game sessions, if that makes sense. So now I'm handling the game parameters established event, but now I need the game rune slots established event so I can place my slots. And what this is going to do is I'm going to take the, I'm just going to say for each var slot in event.slots, and then I'm going to say game view.add slot to calculate the X and Y. Somebody do the math for me. Somebody who isn't me, do the math for me, please. Yeah, I'll do that in a second. Public void handle, game rune. Okay, so then I have my game runes established event. This is going to be easier. I can just say for var rune in event.runes. Then I need to determine if it needs to go in the left gutter or the right gutter. So to do that, I just need to carry an index. And then I need to also calculate the total size of the board. So total runes is going to be game view dot board width times game view dot board height. And then to calculate which gutter I want to go in, I can do game view dot add rune, passing in if index is greater than total runes divided by 2, then we're going to put it in the left gutter, otherwise we'll put it in the right gutter, and then we'll pass in rune. And you know what, I can just change this to total runes divided by, or half total runes, divide that by 2, and then I don't need to repeat that calculation every time. So simple enough. And then the game started event will simply start the game. So I'll say game view dot start. I'll take off the on GUI up there. And now the last bit that we need to figure out is the math to figure out which X and Y position our slot goes in to. So I can just do it the easy way. So var isn't multiplied by half faster than divided by 2. That will figure out, I mean, that'll be figured out by the compiler, if it is. So I can just do this the kind of lazy way. I can say if x is greater than game view dot board width, then we can say x equals 0, y plus plus, otherwise x plus plus. So there we go. Now at this point our game should actually start, hopefully, maybe. So let's see what happens. Oops, I'm in the wrong scene, aren't I? Yep, I'm in the wrong scene on both of them. Hold on. Let me select scene 1 and rebuild. Actually, honestly, the compiler would probably have already even though the compiler would have already optimized the thing that I manually optimized, which is why I don't worry about micro optimizations, but for some reason I was feeling self-conscious about that code. Okay, now we don't get any errors on the server, but we do get some invalid operation exceptions. Particularly on right here and right here. So what does this have to say? Get generic type definition is throwing an invalid operation exception. Oh, that's because, well, no. If not is generic type. Oh, wow. This should not be an and, this should be an or. Whoops. See, what was happening with that code is that this is looping through all of my interfaces that my particular type implements. But look at this. I'm now implementing an interface that is not a generic type. And if you invoke get generic type definition on a type that isn't a generic type, then it throws an exception. And for some reason I had an and here when I should have had an or. But now this should work. If that made sense to everyone. Boolean logic is hard. And hey, look at that. Our gutter works. But something is wrong with our board. So the first thing I want to do is I want to see if these objects were even instantiated. Okay, up to 4 of my slots were, but then I got a invalid operation exception due to this. This should not be is equal to, this should be is equal, or greater than should be equal or greater than, blah, blah, blah. Comparison logic, or inequality logic is hard. So is BuzzNet more or less still working for everyone right now? If they post something in it, it's not dead. For some reason, I'm still in there. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so now we're still getting a slot must be placed within the game board. Alrighty. So what are we getting? We're getting an invalid operation exception right there. We're getting a null reference exception right here for whatever dumb reason that is. Okay, I'm just going to throw... this argument exception sucks. I'm going to say we got... but the size of the board is... But I am very happy that I did put this sanity check in here, because otherwise we would not be throwing an exception, but we would be getting really weird results. So that's a nice thing about putting sanity checks in your code. But now hopefully I'll be able to know exactly what's tripping up my my slots. We got 4-0, but the size of the board is 420. It's 420. Oh, sorry. I'm a child. Let's see here. Why would it do that? Oh, you know what? I should probably be doing this check after I do the increment. Sorry, can't brain today. I really would like to create a better feedback loop for this, but the problem is that there's not much you can do about it other than trying to simulate another client, and it becomes very difficult at that point. Hey, look at that. Now, all we have are an invalid operation exception and no reference exception. So let's figure out what's causing those. The invalid operation exception is happening right there, quite possibly because this isn't returning, and because I never initialized the sessions, my game board start is null? No, it isn't. That can't be true. Game board, start game, invalid operation exception, rune game go line 74, or rune game go line 74. Game board is null. Ah, because game board is instantiated during initialization. Though, wait, this is starting to hurt my brain. Because if the game board is never instantiated, but it has to be instantiated, because I invoke initialize. Sometimes I hate Unity. Okay, so let's track down the first bug. Okay, we're getting an invalid operation exception. That's most likely, according to this, it is from the single, which means that we never found a user ID that matched the user ID that we have, which is impossible. I'm going to go ahead and cause the server to refresh. It could be keeping some sessions around that I don't want it to, because that code that's failing shouldn't fail ever. Which is why I used, again, another sanity check. Instead of using something like first or default, I use single, because single will throw an exception if it can't find the one and only one of the thing that you're looking for, which I had assumed would be the true 100% of the time, but obviously it's not, which means that by doing that I've now identified a bug in my code. Okay, so I guess the easiest way to debug this would be to say debug log out my user ID, then say debug.log string.concat, passing in game sessions.select t.userid.toString.toArray, and instead of doing concat, do join. Alright, so that should tell me what's wrong with that code. Okay, what do we got? Well, that's not possible. Let's see here. Our game sessions only has one user in it, because LobbyGo gets sessions for users, event.userid's. Event.userid's, hold on. What are you doing? You're doing something dumb, aren't you? User IDs contains t.id. No, that's... Oh, right, my sessions never include myself. Okay, well, I can fix that by having the sessions include myself. So to do that, I'm going to jump into, which I should have done already, I'm going to jump into View. I'm going to find the code that happens when a lobby is joined. That should be hopefully easy if I wrote this code decent enough. Yep, joins right there. We publish session joined lobby event. Wait a sec. Who invokes add session? That's handled by the game manager and the lobby game object. So that happens when lobby joined thingy, and that happens when joined lobby. So that means after we pass in the join lobby event, then we can pass in, or, you know, it'd be easier. So I could just do that. There we go. However, this will be a this will cause an issue where we will be able to challenge ourselves, which isn't good, but that can be fixed with some simple UI magic. But I'm not worried about that right now. I just want to see that bug go away. Oh crap. Which one am I? There, B. There we go. Nope, I'm B. I just challenged myself. Hold on, let me fix the UI so that's not possible. Rune Slinger, no. Unity C#. Jump into my lobby, jump onto my on GUI, look at my default state GUI method, go sessions and sessions where it's not us. So I can say sessions.where t.value.id does not equal we never get our user ID, do we? Okay, so that means we need a way to get our user ID. So I'll do rsession.id. Or I could just do where value does not equal rsession. Then I can create a field called lobby session rsession, which will be us. And we'll set that by our... if I look at my game manager, lobby joined event, instantiate that. I'm going to add a initialize method to my lobby game object. I wish that we had constructors, but we don't have constructors, so we just have to do that. Passing in user ID, which, wait a sec, user ID is public, but I don't have an instance. No, I do have an instance. It's a singleton. Yeah, so I don't really have to do that. All I have to do is jump into my lobby game object and on add session, all I got to do is say if session.id equals game manager.instance.user.id, then our session equals session. Now we should no longer appear in the lobby. Of course, that is assuming that I don't have any syntax errors. Hate my life. Whatever. What? No! There we go. Okay, whatever. Alright, so besides the fact that for some reason I still wasn't able to have that working right, I did fix all of the bugs that I previously was trying to fix, except for now I want to make it so that I don't appear inside of my own lobby list. So first off, let me take care of those two debug logs that I put in my, I believe my network manager or my game manager. Game manager. Take care of those. Then I need to go back into my lobby game object and make sure t.value does not equal our session. Value does not equal our session, if ID equals user ID, then our session equals session, add session is invoked. I wonder if I just didn't build it hard enough. Because from what I'm looking at, if I go to add session, I can go ahead and say debug log RID equals blah, their ID equals blah. So RID is always going to be game manager.instance.user ID. Their ID is always going to be session.id. Hit run. So let me see. RID equals 0, their ID equals 8, RID equals 0, their ID equals 8. And then, for some reason, it decides to throw a fit. Because, for some reason, session number 8 is being added twice. And if I look at my... Oh, what are you complaining about, Visual Studio? Shut up. If I look at my stack trace, the first one happens when lobby session. Oh, you know what? If I go back into my game manager, event.sessions. Yeah, something's not playing right with something. So let's just follow this logic. Session.publish join lobby event. Passing in... Oh. It gets sent twice. That's why it's throwing an exception. So I can just do sessions where t dot or sessions dot where t does not equal session. There we go. Server's fixed. So now it's not going to be sending in that information twice, which means I'm not going to be getting that dictionary exception, which means that my current session should be set to the proper value, which means that my session should no longer appear on my lobby list. Wow. I'm really bad at this. Yep, you can still challenge yourself. That's not ideal. All right, I'm going to go ahead and think about this and go on break because it's been about an hour. So, and we're back. So it looks like we found our first problem that's arisen because of the way things are ordered. At the moment, events are all published immediately. They are not queued up and published after a command has successfully executed, which means, unfortunately, that means that our login handler is sending its result. If you recall, the result contains the ID of the user that you are. It sends this result back after the lobby has technically been joined, which is after these events have been published. So that's going to be problematic, but we can quickly fix that problem by jumping back into Unity C#, jumping into our login or our lobby game object, removing the concept of an R session, and then down here checking to see if t-valued does not equal game manager instance user ID. I'll just add that to the queue of things that are going to have to be or t.value.id, sorry, of things that will be addressed at some point when I have time off screen to kind of figure out how I want to go with the architecture. But as you see, we now can no longer challenge ourselves. Let's make sure that we can still challenge another player. Okay. So that works. Now, I hope that people shouting doesn't pick up on my mic. Anyway, so let's see. Now what we can go ahead and do is write the code that will send a command to try to place a rune, and then also write the events that will either reject a rune placement or accept a rune placement. So let's jump back into RuneSlinger, and let's create a command. And the command is going to be place rune command. And place rune command is going to be an I command. And it's going to have a uint rune ID and a uint slot ID. Then what we have to do is create a command handler for this command. So we need place rune handler, which will be I command handler of type rune place rune command, and then yeah. So at this point we need to find out what game this current session is a part of, which we can simply attach something to his registry so we can access that game, which is simple enough to do. I can jump down into my lobby component. When a game is created, then what I can do is I can now say for each var session in sessions session.registry.set and then pass in game. So now each game has each session has a game attached to it if it's in a game. So then in the place rune handler, I can now say session.registry.get, passing in the type of rune game, I believe that's the name of my component, and then do game goes into, and then this is simply going to do game.place rune, and I'm going to pass in the session that we're placing for, and then the command.rune ID, and then a command.slot ID. Now this particular command is not going to have a response to it, because the response is going to be handled by the rune placement accepted or rune placement rejected event. So what I can do now is jump into my rune game. The first thing I'm going to need to do is grab my rune and my rune slot out of it. So rune equals runes at rune ID. This will throw an exception if it's invalid ID, which is exactly the behavior I want. And then slot equals rune slot, which again, if the slot ID is not found, an exception will be thrown. Then I can do if rune.rune type index equals slot.rune type index and rune.type equals slot.type, then publish to all new, and then I need to pass a rune placed event. A rune placed event will have uint rune ID, uint slot ID. And then new rune placed event, passing in rune ID, slot ID. What I could also do is I can create a, in the future, I'm going to make these a little bit more powerful, these objects right here, just for the server or these classes, so that we can know if that particular rune has been placed or that particular slot hasn't been placed, so that we can validate that information. In fact, I can already do that right now with some simple inheritance. I can go ahead and create, you know, runes and rune slots aren't actually value objects, by the way. I kind of lied to everyone. They don't fit the actual definition of value objects. Just whatever you do, don't tell what's his face, Greg Young or whatever his name is, because yeah, they really actually aren't value objects. But anyway, so I'm going to create a server rune, which inherits from rune. Server rune will have a public bool is placed, and then I will do a server slot. Actually, you know what? I am not going to use inheritance for this for a few different reasons, but I don't have the time to justify this reason. No, it's not just because I hate parents. In this case, it won't work out right because I want to be able to pass in the rune into the serializer without the serializer picking up the fact that it's a polymorphic type and then serializing the isPlaced property and passing that to the client. So in this case, composition makes more sense because of that. So anyway, so server slot will be taken a rune slot, and then a public bool is placed. Then on my rune game, instead of having runes and rune slots, I'll have server rune and server slot and server rune and server slot. And then this will be rune.rune.runeType index slot.slot.rune blah 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 blah. Then these will be new instantiations of server slots, and these will be new instantiations of server runes. And then instead of passing in rune slots.values, I'll pass in rune slots.values.select slot, and then .select rune. So there we go. Now we can keep track of if a rune or slot is placed already. So now I can say if rune.isPlaced or if slot is placed, then throw new invalid operation exception. Then if we do place it, then I want to say rune.isPlaced equals true and slot is placed equals true. Then I say publish to all rune place event. Otherwise, I want to publish just to the session that attempted this this placement. I want to publish a new rune placement rejected event, passing in the rune ID and the slot ID that were rejected. So now I can say rune placement rejected. Or actually, you know what? It would be probably better to do this as a yeah, the code will be a bit cleaner. Yeah, I'm going to keep the rune placed event. What I'm going to do is instead of publish to all, I'm going to say sessions.accept our session, and then I'm going to say for each var other session in this other session dot publish, and then why did you put a thing right there? And then we will repeat session 1. There we go. So if it does become placed, the other sessions are notified. Then I'm going to have this method return a Boolean. In the case that it was not placed, I return false. In the case that it was placed, I return true. Then at this point, I jump back into my place rune command, and I want to create a public class place rune response, I command response, which will be bool was placed, private, and then now place rune command is now going to have that. And what do you, whoops, there we go. Okay, so there's our code. And now I have to jump into the command handler for my place rune handler, and now I need to set a response. So what I can do is var did bool did place equals false, did place equals, I can just use a var there, can I? And then I can say context dot set response new place rune response, and then did place, and I can, to make that consistent, I can rename this to was placed because that sounds better. Then I jump back into my awesome rune peer and do my manual dependency injection stuff because I'm a terrible person. I'll fix it next week, okay? Next week I'll fix this code and have it automatically, just use autofact to do this, which it already should be using. So I'll say else if, oh, this is getting so nasty. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. place rune command equal. This is like almost, this is actually pretty embarrassing. But I don't have enough time to talk about artifact today. And I really just wanted basic game to get going. There we go. There's my really, really pathetic excuse for a dependency of blah, 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 inversion of control container. So that should actually pretty much complete all the server code for what I wanted to do. Now if I jump back into the client, there's two things that I need to handle. I'll jump into Unity first so it picks up the changes to the assemblies, because sometimes it doesn't. Then I'll jump back into Unity C#. And my game go is going to have to handle an event for iEvent handler rune placed event. Now, if we receive a rune placed event, that means that the opponent placed a rune. So what I can do is I can say game view dot rune placed, pass in event dot rune ID and event slot ID. Then the final thing I need to do is I need to fix my place rune method. If you recall, my place rune method is an implementation of the iGame commands interface, which is passed into the game view when it's instantiated or when it's initialized. So this is where I want to put the network code that sends in the placement of a rune. So now I can do network, network manager dot instance dot dispatch new place rune command, passing in rune.id, slot.id, and then my action is going to be response. If response.response.was placed, then I say game view.rune placed, event.rune, rune.id, slot.id, otherwise game view.placement rejected, rune.id, slot.id. So I'm thinking that should be a pretty big chunk of the game network logic implemented at this point. I did like how that came together, with the exception of the poor man IOC container. Okay, let's see what happens when I drag a 0 over to this. Ah, look at that. Ah! I just arrow shook everything away. There we go. So now if I place 4, it becomes placed, and the gutter does indeed update. And that is why it's a really good idea to separate your view from your controller logic, because then stuff like this becomes really straightforward to put together. Now if I put in 6, that goes in 2. Hold on, I completely screwed this up because I changed the aspect ratio. The game is not designed to be able to change the aspect ratio, which is something that I've been saying for a while. So let me go ahead and restart this whole thing. Okay, so if I drag 1 over into 1, that gets placed, the gutter gets updated. And for some reason I can see more. Oh yeah, again, that's because the aspect ratio isn't constrained. So this guy right here has an unfair advantage over the guy in the player, because the guy in the player has a different aspect ratio, which results in him seeing less of the board. But anyway, so I can play 7, I can go ahead and play 6, and that gets updated, 0 gets updated, 1 gets updated. The boards look the exact same. 3, 3, now if I jump back here, do 4. Sorry, this is just kind of fun. But yeah. So how you guys doing? I mean, is there anything about the code that's tripping anybody up at this point? Yeah, solution, I'm probably not going to worry about that. That's more of a UI concern, really. I'm not that interested in the UI. Honestly, I just like to see the fact that this code right here is all the client-side, pretty much all the client-side logic that needs to be put together in order to handle a game, which makes me happy. You have to admit that's a little sexy. Or don't admit it, whatever. My feelings won't be hurt. This code does need some love, though, in certain places of it, though. But yeah. I'm just trying to think what else we can go ahead and knock out. Because we will have to handle disconnects and the game actually ending. Which, yeah, we can throw that together real fast, I guess. That shouldn't be that hard. Famous last words. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my components rune game. I'm going to set the board width and board height to 2 and 2, just to make it a lot easier to beat the game. Actually, we can just do 1 and 2. There we go. So it's kind of a boring game, but it makes it easier to do that. Then what I can do is on place rune, actually, rune in slot.isPlaced, I want to track which session placed that rune. So I'm going to change isPlaced to I network session called placed by. And this is going to be placed by equals session. And then if placed by does not equal null. And then I'll also do it, just for consistency, I'll do it on the slot as well. So I networked session placed by does not equal null. Placed by equals session. Then what I gotta do is, after we've told everybody that all the runes have been placed, I need to loop through all of my runes and determine if they've all been placed in the entire game, in which case we end the game. So I'm going to say for each var, or I can just say var is game over equals runes.all value.placed by does not equal null. So if the game is over, then we need to end the game, determine who won, and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to leave all this code in this method right now, just because I don't know how the code's going to be structured, but I will probably be refactoring this method very shortly, because when a client disconnects, that's going to be considered a forfeit. No, I'm not worrying about the database right now. I just want the game to be able to end. So if is game over, then we need to determine who won. So we just need to count how many runes were placed by each people. So, I mean, I guess what we can do is just say var runes by session, placed runes by session equals runes dot group by b dot value dot placed by, and then I can order this by descending of the count, and then I can say var winner equals place rune by session first dot key dot, there we go. So then I need to tell everybody who the winner is and that the game ended. So I'm going to go up here in events and I'm going to create a game ended event. which implements iEvent. I'm also going to create a value object called GameEndedStatus. I'm going to say player1 draw. Yeah, I guess that's really it. Or aborted. I don't know. Something like that. So status, and then we need a uint, which I'm going to make nullable in the case of a draw. Winner user ID. So, well, actually, first of all, I need to determine if there was a draw, which means that if there is a draw, that means all of these are equal to each other, or there's at least two that are equal to each other. I'll see if all of them are equal to each other. Var was draw equals place runes by session, all t dot count equals place runes by session first dot count. I have no idea if this is the most efficient way to do it. Probably isn't, but it's relatively straightforward. So if it was a draw, then we need to publish to all new game ended event passing in draw and null. Otherwise, I publish to all new game ended event of player 1 with the user ID of winner.id. User, I hate this registry thing. Get auth component t goes into ID. I really need to, that's another thing on my list of things to refactor. And then I'm going to turn this into a ternary because I was too lazy to write the ternary myself and wanted GSharper to write it for me. So then we have a game ended event. Yeah, and that's pretty much all the information we need at this point. We could pass in scores to people, I guess, you know, game sessions and what their scores are. I mean, that really wouldn't be that difficult to do. So I'm going to go back into my game ended event, and I'm going to have a dictionary of uint for user IDs and then uint for scores. And then scores are simply going to say var scores equals placed runes by session dot to dictionary. The key is going to be key dot registry dot get auth component uint ID, and then the value is, I have two t's, don't I? One of these days I'm going to write an expression with so many nested lambdas in it, I'm going to run out of letters in the alphabet. Anyway, t.count, which is considered to be the score. A.count, sorry. Which, for consistency, this should really be t, but consistency of lambda variables are something that I could honestly care less about. So then I have scores, which I can then pass in to this. So we now have scores, but you don't want to compile because you cannot convert, because you need to turn this into a uint. There we go. Okay, so now the game has been ended, which is cool. Which doesn't necessarily mean the player is back in the lobby, because I want to display them a screen that shows them the result of the game, and then allow them to exit that out, then jump back into the lobby. So let's jump back into the lobby code and take a look at how we are being added to games. So we have a list of games going on, and how do we determine it? We determine if somebody is already in a game by sessions in game. So what I need to do is I need to write a method that brings the user out of a game back into the lobby, which basically all that's going to do is clear them from sessions in game and eventually destroy a game. out of the games, but I won't worry about that right now, even though I probably should. Actually, why does this even exist? I don't need that. There we go. Problem solved. So now I just need a method that returns a session back into the lobby. So I'm going to say public void leave game iNetwork session, which does if not sessions in game remove session. Just another sanity check. You are not in a game anyway. I don't know. Brains hurt. So we now have the leave game method, which I'll handle probably next week, maybe, depending on how far I get with what I want to do. But anyway, so the game ended event, that's going to cause the client to display the result of the game to the user. So I'm going to jump back into Unity, or well, first of all, I'm going to compile this. Ooh, and then what I want to do is just another sanity check. On my Rune game, I want to have a private bool is running, which is set to true after the game started event is published to everyone, and then is set to false when the game has been ended, and then is checked by the place rune method. There we go. Just another sanity check. Okay, so now we have all this code done. So now on our game ended event, we need to listen to that on the client. And if that happens, we need to switch over to a game object that will display the results of the game to the user. So I'll go ahead and compile. Jump into Unity to make sure it updates all my assemblies. Jump into Unity C#. I'm going to have that handled by my game manager, which I'm kind of considering to be the thing that's orchestrating the different components. So I'll have a game ended event. Now, game ended event will will destroy game o, blah blah. Destroy game go. After it destroys the game object, then we need to instantiate a game object that will be responsible for displaying the UI to the user if they've won or lost the game. So I'll have a game results go. Which again, the separation is very important because it makes it a lot easier to test with test scenes. For now, I'm going to have game result go do all of its logic inside of itself, but we could easily create a test scene that just instantiates one of these things. So it allows us to design our user interface without having to go through the process of winning and losing a game every time. So making the game result be decoupled from the game go is actually a conscious decision that I'm not making just for purity, but actually has practical applications. Game results go, game results, and then I'll say game results go dot initialize, which I'll copy this word out of here and initialize it to, I'm just going to initialize it to the event. Yeah, I'm going to initialize it to the event, why not? Okay, so what that's going to do is it's going to have a private game ended event equals event. Also, I do need a list of sessions that were in the game. So I will be asking for an IEnumerable of game sessions because it needs to be able to relate a user ID to a username. And so to do that, what I can do is game go dot game sessions, which I can just create an IEnumerable of game sessions that returns game sessions values. Actually, what am I doing? I can just do sessions dot To dictionary, K goes into ID, V goes into itself, and then I can do public void on GUI, and now I can present a GUI. So I'll just say GUI layout dot begin horizontal, GUI layout dot end horizontal, and then I don't really care what this looks like, so I'll just go ahead and say GUI layout dot label game status is event dot status. Then I can say if event dot winner user ID does not equal null, then GUI layout dot label winner is game sessions at event dot winner user ID dot value dot username. Then I can present the scores, so I'll say GUI layout dot label scores for each var score in event dot scores. GUI layout dot label blah equals blah, where the first blah is game sessions at score dot key dot username, and the second blah is score dot value. There. So now we should be able to win and lose the game, which will be nice. Yay. No. That sucks. Let's see. Game status, draw, scores, A2. And for some reason, my thingy didn't get destroyed. Because I destroyed the mono behavior, not the game object. I hate my life. There we go. Now, for some reason, whoops, that's not obviously not going to work. I'll do that after I do you. Then there was another problem where it said it was a draw for some reason. So was draw equals place runes by sessions all, groups by that. Oh, right. Because it'll be a draw if only one player placed runes, because there'll only be one thing in the doohickey thing. I'll worry about that next week. Let's just see if it, I'm going to do board width 3, board height 1. And of course I didn't recompile the server. But this should result in a draw, with both players having one score. But I didn't recompile the server, and for some reason the game still didn't get destroyed. GameGo.GameObject. Let's see here. How do I destroy the login go? Oh, I don't even destroy the game object on the login go, do I? Oh, that is because it is a game object. Is the game go a game object? I don't think so. Game go is instantiated right there. No, it's a component, which I instantiate manually. So destroy. Let's destroy immediate. Okay, so if I place 1 and 0, and then this guy places 2. Game status, player 1, winner B, scores B2. Okay, so that's still working, but for some reason my game view... haha. I know what it is. In my game go, when I on destroy, I don't actually destroy the game view. Okay, so now I can challenge a player, accept the challenge, drag a rune there, and then drag a rune there, and game status, player 1, winner B, scores B is 2, A is 1. Alright, so how's everyone doing? We have a couple things to fix next week. First thing I'm actually going to do right now, I didn't want a horizontal, I wanted a vertical. So next week, the first thing I definitely want to do though, before the IOC thing, is this code needs to be rewritten. That's just what first came out of my mind, but it does have a big bug in it. Then we will be cleaning up my rune pier. This code will be delegated to an IOC container. Then I'm probably going to do something with the registry. Actually, I don't mind the registry for attaching the lobby sessions and the games to it, but I do mind the registry when I'm trying to get the auth out of, or the auth component out. Because if you notice, every time I try to get the ID of one of my users, I have to say key.registry get auth component and do that. For something that doesn't even need locking, it doesn't matter. I can just have the auth component literally be a property on my iNetwork session and then have it be a public getter and a public setter, and then when login happens, it just authenticates and sets that, because it doesn't need locking. So that'll clean up a lot of my code. But after that, definitely want to do the IOC, definitely want to fix the registry, definitely want to fix my buggy code on my game ended event. I need to make it so if a player disconnects, the game gets forfeited. And then if we have enough time, we can take a look at building out a proper unit of work for my events, so that events are all kind of packed together into a single unit of work and then dispatched at the end of a command. And then I need to figure out a way to get a database session into my Rune game, so I can track statistics, blah, 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 statistics and stuff. So yeah, so I think that's about it. It's exactly 9 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye to all the future people. So, goodbye.